Hot off the presses, if you look down in the description box below, I'm giving you my most updated recent version of my 2015 NFL mock draft. The post-week 13 edition. And I only did one round, frankly. I kind of got lazy this time. Probably put this all together on a good shit, basically. It's the truth of the matter. So there you go. You ever wonder what I did when I'm dropping a dooskies? Sometimes it might be a one-round mock draft. What a great life it is indeed. All right, so some of the big things for me to talk about in this particular mock draft as I'm looking at it. You'll see that I stuck Amari Cooper, #1 to the Raiders, in part because I didn't want to get into the argument about whether the Raiders should build around Derek Carr or they should be looking for another quarterback in this upcoming draft. I just went with this scenario because I'm not sure at this point what the Raiders are going to do this offseason in terms of if they're going to fire Reggie McKenzie or not. I'm not sure, even though we hear reports about Mark Davis being in love with Derek Carr and having a man crush on Derek Carr. I'm not sure if he brings in somebody like a Jim Harbaugh. Is a Jim Harbaugh going to want a Derek Carr, or is he going to want his own guy? With that said, for the Raiders, it's kind of interesting timing for them to potentially have the #1 overall pick in this draft upcoming, which it looks like they probably will end up with because they may be in a position where they don't take a quarterback. They also may be in a position where there's not a quarterback that teams are looking so desperately to move up to get. So they're kind of in a lose-lose situation in a way. If they don't take a quarterback and Derek Carr doesn't pan out, then it sets the organization back for years. Then, if you do take a quarterback and you move on from Derek Carr after only one season, you're basically kind of in a way starting over again. So it's kind of interesting because the Raiders, frankly, you are starting over anyways because you're terrible. You suck. You have perhaps the least talented roster in all of the National Football League. So if they're going to stay at #1 and they're going to stick with Derek Carr for the time being, they better get him some help. And you got to give him a big-time weapon. And Amari Cooper is that big-time weapon. You'll notice in this case, in this scenario, Tampa is #2 in the draft, so I've got them taking Marcus Mariota. I've got Jameis Winston going 5 to the New York Jets. I look at these two quarterbacks. I haven't fully come to my conclusion yet about whether or not I'm really high or really sold on either one of these guys or both of these guys or none of these guys. I'm not sure yet. But I would say this at this point, based off the way I know things and based off of the way I view things, that if Tampa Bay's at 2 and Tennessee's at 5, they have no choice but to go quarterback here. They just have no choice. A surprise name you might see in the top 10 is Ronnie Stanley, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame. I've been thinking about putting him in for a while, and as I've watched more and more of him, I really like him. I think he's a guy that has the athleticism and the size to project very, very well to left tackle in the National Football League, where some of the previously highly thought of tackles in this draft class, the Obeys and the Scherfs, may not be able to stick on the left side. That might elevate the draft stock of somebody like a Ronnie Stanley and perhaps even over somebody like a La'el Collins, who some teams might be concerned about whether or not he's best positioned to play guard at the National Football League. You'll notice I've moved Jaelen Strong up into the top 10. With the movement and shift in the NFL towards the bigger, more physical type of wide receiver, it could really be beneficial to a Jaelen Strong because teams might not be quite as concerned as they have been in recent years about a wide receiver's ability to separate because of the fact that defensive backs aren't as easily able to touch and kind of hand guide and defend wide receivers in a physical way. That size makes a huge difference, and a guy like Jaelen Strong has shown those type of physical type skills that you might have seen out of recent big physical wide receivers that have been drafted, guys like the Mike Evans, guys like the Alshon Jeffries, guys like the Calvin Benjamins of the world, what have you. So I could see a guy like Jaelen Strong's draft stock really shooting up. I think this wide receiver class is good. I don't think, obviously, that it's as good as the historical all-time great class that was the 2014 wide receiver class. But I think this 2015 wide receiver class is good, and I think it's going to be a little bit underrated because it's going to be compared to that 14 class, and that's not very fair. But I look at a class that has probably 5 first-round picks, and if a guy like Dorial Green-Beckham had actually been able to play this year, you'd be talking about him potentially being the first wide receiver off the board, not Amari Cooper. And you might have as many 6 guys that could be viewed as first-round picks. But this is a good wide receiver class. And if you're looking for a wide receiver help early in this draft and you're looking for some impact talent, I think there is some impact talent in this class. I don't think there's quite the depth of overall talent and just depth at the position like there was in the last draft. So if you want to get your big-time, productive, impact wide receivers, you're going to need to get them early in this draft. Other players that really stand out to me as guys that are going to maybe move up the board just kind of as I look at it. Some of the usual suspects I've talked about before, the Shaq Thompsons of the world when you're not playing running back, his versatility and athleticism, and the movement of the NFL towards a much more open passing attack. And with the increased importance of big, athletic, physical tight ends, you need those type of linebacker, hybrid type of guys that can defend against those types of tight ends and even slot wide receivers. And Shaq Thompson has that type of athleticism to be able to do just that. He's one of my favorite players to watch, and I think at this point, he's one of the best players to come out into this 2015 NFL draft. You'll look at other guys like TJ Clemmings and Bud Dupree. You know, the bottom line is again, and I've talked about this throughout the process of doing these mock drafts, the players in some cases that have been projected for months to be in this spot that you think are this and think are that just totally are not. This is about mocking where these players could go based off of NFL scouts and front offices, executives, and their philosophies, what they see. So more often than not, you see it every year. The media hypes up certain guys, and then those certain guys end up being second, third, fourth, fifth round picks when the actual draft comes around. And I think, again, you could see that some of the highly touted guys that I've seen that just haven't really wowed me yet. The guys like the Randy Gregory, I know I keep mentioning him, but I haven't seen it yet. I know people talk big about Benardrick, McKinney. If I could talk, it would help. But I just don't see it yet. You know, I've seen Denzel Perryman. I don't see it yet. You know, I think in a lot of ways, the Cedric Obehe's, the Brandon Sheriffs, I just don't see it. So a lot of these guys have been maybe projected to go in a certain spot. You might be surprised come next April where these guys actually end up. In terms of the running backs, you'll see that I've got Melvin Gordon going 21 to Atlanta and Todd Gurley going 25 to Detroit. If you're Detroit and Gurley's there, you must pounce regardless of need in the defensive backfield or in particular on your defensive line at the defensive tackle position. They need an impact runner. They need an every down back. And same thing for the Atlanta Falcons. I don't care how much Falcon fans want to disagree with me. I think you're fucking morons for not wanting a guy like a Melvin Gordon in the first round, especially if you're picking in this spot. It means you found a way to make the playoffs with like 7 or 8 wins. You need a guy like a Melvin Gordon. At the end of the day, it is about Matt Ryan. That's your franchise player. You can continue to dump all these picks into defensive players and still have your defense be shit, or you could learn, as I've talked about before, from the Dallas Cowboys, and that is establish an identity on offense, control the clock, take some of the pressure off of your quarterback, be very balanced on offense, and you could be a playoff team. Like a good, real, legit playoff team, not a 5-7 right now leading a shitty-ass division type of playoff team. So again, you can look at my mock draft down below. You can let me know what you think. I'll be back again next week for another one. This one will probably be a 2-round edition. So let me know what you think.